You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron, and hello again to my spring football-loving fans. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and I would like to welcome you all to my newest segment here on the show, the UFL News Desk. This will be something that I use to discuss all things UFL with you all as we lead up into the season between the XFL and USFL. The merge has been officially announced. We have a ton of details to go into. I know I'm a little bit late, but I have been very sick the last few days, and I'm finally putting it all together so I can bring to you all every bit of news that I have pulled together in the last, 3 or 4 days since all this stuff has been coming out to discuss with you all, share some opinions. So comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts. If you are somebody who was not a part of this channel prior to the NFL season, because I know we've grown a lot since the NFL kicked off about 18 weeks ago. I do spring football as well. This will not take away my NFL coverage. I do both as the offseason rolls through, but this is just something to do because I fell in love with the USFL and I'm committed to the UFL as long as it's around. So we'll start with the easy stuff. What has been going on? Well, on Sunday, we got a big announcement, the official merger announcement that we've all been waiting for on Fox. On Monday, we got College Game Day, The Rock and Danny Garcia again jumping on and then revealing the conferences and the teams within the conferences as well as the head coaches. We have got so much to discuss. So let's dive on in. We'll start with the announcement on Sunday, The Rock and Danny Garcia on Fox Game Day prior to kickoff of Week 17 for the NFL, sharing their vision of what they want this league to look like going forward, going into the details of why this merger was a necessity, why it was a good idea, and all of that in between. In the press release on their website, and this actually went live before they actually did it because I'm pretty sure I was looking at the website almost 10 minutes before the segment actually aired on Fox Game Day. We got some details as far as what the start of the season is going to look like. Mark your calendars because March 30th, 2024 is when kickoff officially commences for the league as the Birmingham Stallions will head into Arlington to take on the Renegades in a champions versus championship contest. I've got to shout out The Rock on this one here because that's the most WWE-esque thing I could have possibly asked for, and I love to see something like that kind of getting thrown into this new league here, so I'm here for it. Champions versus champions to kick off the season. You could not ask for a bigger possible matchup. There's no waiting. We're going to get the juice right on day number one. We also learned that Russ Brandon will be taking over as president and CEO of this newly formed league, and Daryl Johnston will be in charge of all the football operations. So we're getting a good, healthy mix of leadership from both of these leagues as they kind of slam themselves together. And I think that's good for the league altogether because there are things that both leagues did really well and things that both leagues maybe did poorly. So being able to take some of the top figureheads of both these leagues and put them together into certain positions to help this league thrive is only going to benefit in the long run. Now, moving from Sunday into Monday. Now we have the UFL, we have a new logo. For those of you that are maybe curious as to my thoughts on the new logo, I actually like it. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about a logo change, but I really do like it because it takes some of the modern look, but it also keeps some of the classic USFL flair that they had with their logo as well. I actually think they did a really good job putting this together. Now on Monday, we got the conference announcements and we also got the team announcements. So once again, Danny Garcia and The Rock, they are obviously the faces of this league, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Very notable public figures, The Rock especially. I mean, if you don't know who The Rock is in 2024, you must have been living under one. That's probably the best way that I can put that because the man is literally everywhere to the point where I've heard conversation of him potentially running for president in multiple stages in my life. But that being said, the conferences and the teams officially announced. We have 8 teams. I will say I'm a little bit disappointed by it, but I also understand because of the business side of things. This is probably how it was always going to be, and they probably looked at the potential of maybe having like 10 or 12 teams, but it was probably always going to end up being this way. You take the most successful markets, or 8 most successful markets, you throw them all together into one league, and then you roll from there. And again, while I am disappointed from a business side of things, I get it. And that's one thing that as a fan, you can't have that get lost on you. These are businesses at the end of the day. Two businesses coming together to do their absolute best to make as much money as possible while also providing a league for some of these NFL hopefuls here. So I get it. I understand it. Am I thrilled about it? Not necessarily, but feel free to share your thoughts below. The 8 teams merging from these two conferences are, with the USFL conference, we have the Stallions, the Showboats, the Panthers, and the Roughnecks, the Houston Roughnecks, taking the spot of the Gamblers in the USFL. And I've got to say, if there was any team that I would probably have taken from the XFL conferences and slipped into the USFL conferences, the Roughnecks are they're a team that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of history with the Houston Roughnecks name in that area there, and it makes a lot of sense. And I also had somebody point out to me, because I was a little upset we lost the Houston Gambler name, but with the XFL having some lineage in Las Vegas, would it not be pretty awesome if somehow the Las Vegas Gamblers made a head here? I mean, I understand they had the Vipers team in the XFL, but I'm going to be honest with you, Las Vegas Vipers sounds like a creative team that you'd get for any of you who have ever played some of the older Madden games. That's literally what it sounds like. Not a fan. The Houston Gamblers, though, Las Vegas Gamblers, that's something I could get behind if that winds up being the case. It honestly makes a lot more sense, too, taking the Gamblers name and throwing it in Las Vegas. But USFL teams, Stallions, Showboats, Panthers, and Roughnecks. I honestly like it. The XFL, you got the Renegades, you got the Brahmas, you got the Battlehawks, and you got the Defenders here. Not in the slightest am I surprised about the Renegades, the Battlehawks, and Defenders. The Brahmas, I am a little bit surprised by. I understand that football is a literal religion in the South, especially in Texas. There are high school teams that have nicer stadiums in Texas than college football teams do up here where I live in the New England area. So I get it. I understand Texas, massive football market, but I know that you have an area like Orlando that is constantly showing up and showing out for football teams that they're given and then having them ripped away from them. And I don't really understand why, other than it might have to do with just Orlando not being a great television market. That's probably the only thing I could think of. And I haven't really dove into those numbers, so I'm not 100% sure. That's just kind of a guess off the top of my head. But I was a little surprised by the San Antonio Brahmas. But they're here. It's also a team that very clearly is one driven by The Rock as his Brahma Bull thing. Brahmas, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that that name ended up carrying over into this merged league the more you think about it from that aspect of things. But ultimately, Texas being such a massive football market, it doesn't really surprise me. I would have personally liked seeing a team maybe stuck in Orlando for the start of this new merged league, and then maybe getting another another Texas team rather within the league, maybe down the road should they look to expansion. But we're looking at 8 teams, the conferences named after the former leagues. And this was something I saw get talked a lot about, and I think is honestly great for the league that they did this. First things first, marketability. You can lean as heavily as you want to into the USFL versus the XFL shtick. That is a massive selling point. I know there are some people who don't like the idea of it, but it is a massive, massive selling point. And it's one that you could not have written more perfectly for these two spring football leagues to come in and collide against. Because, like, what were you going to call the conferences otherwise? Just the South and the Northeast, or like the South and the North? Like, is that what you were going to do? Why take two bland division conference names, whatever you want to call them? I don't necessarily know what the correct verbiage is so at this point so far, but why not take the two brands that you've already established, use their names, build that rivalry even further than it was already built on its own, because these two leagues were competing at the same time, slam them together and give people a reason to talk more each and every single week. It makes a ton of sense. And honestly, I don't think that this was ever not on the table for them. I think from the very beginning, probably one of the first initial conversations was, we've got to keep XFL, USFL relevant within this league in some capacity, because one, the brands are there, they're established, people know what they are. And also from another like look of things, you have to understand that, again, from a business sense, it makes sense to keep the league's names alive so that this doesn't just look like two leagues that had to kind of like fold and merge together to survive, as opposed to it looks better when you think of it's two leagues coming together to create an even bigger entity like that. It looks a lot better optically that way. So again, it's all about business and optics at the end of the day, and taking two leagues, slamming them together, but keeping their prior names relevant is massive to the equation here. So I'm all for it. I really like it. I'm here for it. The big sell for this league continues to be the same thing that The Rock has been pushing, all about the 54th man, didn't make the roster in the NFL. If they had a little more time to sharpen and hone their skills, maybe they get that opportunity instead. And for me personally, I do think that's a great idea. It's a great selling point. And that's basically what these leagues have been about. That 54th guy, that 55th guy who just needs a little more time to get himself ready. Because when you think about it at the end of the day, the guys that don't make it in the league, they're either going overseas, they're playing in the Canadian Football League, which is a completely different rule set. You look at people in the indoor arena leagues, those are also completely different rule sets. You need a league to sharpen your skills in that maybe isn't necessarily a one-to-one mirror of the NFL, but from a large overview is pretty much what the NFL is doing, just at a smaller scale. So the sell makes a lot of sense to me. Not really surprised that that's what they're pushing. It's been what The Rock has been talking this entire time. Now, beyond the big Sunday and Monday announcements, there was a couple of other things that have dropped out. Today, most importantly, we got a little bit more information as far as to how these players are going to be dispersed throughout the league here. This will be something to keep an eye on here because we got dates with it as well. The USFL PA, the Players Association from the USFL, has officially become like the PA for this league at this point here. They announced today that the player allocation will commence on January 5th with an open dispersal draft for the remaining USFL and XFL players scheduled January 15th. This is a big deal because this is going to dictate what players are going to be protected by their teams and not be allowed to be moved around this league. And then I believe, what is the number? They have up to 42 players that they can protect. And from there, the remaining players will be able to kind of just be scattered throughout the rest of the league with whatever spots are still open. So phase one, you basically have surviving team protected designations, which is each surviving USFL team can protect up to 42 contract players assigned to the team, making the selection. Phase two, protected designations involving players on non-surviving teams. Each surviving team shall have the right to claim as additional protected players up to 20 contracted players who were assigned to a non-surviving USFL team. And then you have the dispersal draft, where players on a roster of a USFL team during the 2023 season who are not protected during phase 1 or 2 are now eligible to participate in the dispersal draft, to be conducted by all teams participating in the 2024 season, including USFL surviving teams and surviving teams of any other professional football league, an example, the XFL, that participate in this 2024 season. So that'll be something to keep an eye on as far as players are concerned here. Nice to get a little bit more clarity, because this is something that we've been seeing come through like text messages from like Scooby Wright and Mark Thompson for the last like couple of weeks. And it's nice that it's actually being addressed from the USFL side. I personally haven't seen anything in regards to XFL players specifically. That might be more so my fault than anything else, just because prior to this, I was not really following the XFL. So I'm obviously being fed USFL related stuff more so than others. I don't necessarily know what exactly is working with XFL players. I don't know their contract situation. Again, probably more so my fault than anything, because I didn't follow the XFL, but I'm giving you at least the stuff as far as USFL player allocation is concerned. Now, a couple other notes. This was more just some low-key conversation that flew a little bit under the radar, but is definitely something that is worth talking about here. As we mentioned earlier, President and CEO Russ Brandon joined ESPN Sports Talk for St. Louis and gave some more long-term plans, and also just kind of a little peek into the future, in the very near future at that, as far as the UFL is concerned. So as far as the actual schedule goes for the league, the plan is that it will be out by some point in the middle of this month. So we're about 2 weeks away or so from getting the full-blown schedule of the season. I believe there is still some stuff going on in regards to maybe securing a location for the Houston Roughnecks. That's something that I've been kind of seeing spun around the wheel for the last, honestly, few months right now, as the league has tried to ensure that every single team is playing within their home market. So I think they're still working on the finality of those details. And then once that gets sorted out, which is I'm assuming they're anticipating very soon, we should have a full-blown schedule to look at, discuss, dissect, and go over all of our favorite matchups. So that should be coming out within the next couple of weeks. Russ Brandon also had a little bit to say in regards to potential expansion down the road. So it's clear that everyone involved here thinks that this league is going beyond just, you want to call it maybe year 2, year 3, depending on what league you're looking at, but they planned to play and function beyond just this season, which is exciting. he had this to say in regards to expansion. We're going to continue to look at it, and all the decisions were difficult, no question, from that standpoint, but we're looking at long-term. We're looking at expansion and opportunities, and I'm certain that will be a part of the equation moving forward. So, some of those teams we lost, whether it's from the XFL side, whether it's from the USFL side, there is a really good potential, as long as things go well, if we support this league and love this league the way it needs to be loved, to be able to grow and be a functional entity within the spring football world, there is a really good chance we see teams lost, maybe other teams brought back from the depths of wherever they've been buried for the last handful of years now. As we know, there's been technically 3 iterations of the XFL. There's been a couple iterations now of the USFL. There's a lot of team names still sitting out there that could be brought in and become a part of this league in the future. So again, and this is something I kind of harped on before, but like we got any official announcement. There's a lot of things that we may not agree with as far as how this league is going out. And 8 teams is one of those things that a lot of people were very unhappy with. And I know there's a large crowd of USFL people that are not thrilled to see only 3 USFL teams and there's 5 XFL teams. I get it. I understand it. But if we want this league to succeed, if you want spring football and you want to see these players have the opportunities that they are currently presented now, from now into the future, you've got to support it. You've got to bite your tongue on a few things, make some noise about it, but don't stop watching. Don't not support the league just because you didn't get what you want day one. That's the instant gratification talking. Support the league and what it's trying to do now, but have your voice and opinions heard when we go into that first off season. Let them know what we want to see. I'm sure they're going to ask us what we want to see. And if we're banging the table for expansion and we're coming out and showing ourselves, having our voices heard, showing support for the league, I can almost guarantee if their money is right and we're making them their money, more than likely we will see that expansion happen. On top of that, one final thing, Dean Blandino and Mike Pereira will continue to work with the league, and I think this is really good. I think one of my favorite things about spring football is the transparency and just very open-ended conversation that you get from officiating, and especially in the USFL. I can't speak on the XFL as much, but I loved hearing just the conversation, getting the dialogue from, the official rooms when they were in there reviewing stuff. It was one of the more interesting things I think I've ever seen in sports in general, not even just football. That's something that I want to see more of, and I'm glad to see that we're going to keep Dean Blandino and Mike Pereira around to help just continue to enhance that and continue to allow officiating to be a more open and transparent thing in the spring football league. I think that's something that is very highly contested right now and a bit of an issue in the NFL. And I think it's one of those things that if people that watch the NFL were to tune into spring football and kind of see that open and transparent kind of conversation that we get, they would probably be, 1, more interested in seeing what the UFL product is, and 2, probably want something like that to be pulled into the NFL. I don't know if the NFL wants that, but it is something just to worth thinking about. But that is pretty much everything I've got for you all. Feel free, fire away in the comment section down below. This was show number 1 of UFL News Desk. Again, this will be how I discuss any sort of news as things come out leading into the season. And as the season goes on, this will be a permanent piece of my show here on the Greeks Gridiron. So feel free to comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts on everything I just discussed. Let me hear your thoughts on the show. Anything you may want to see me add to it, maybe take away from, let me know. But that is it for me. I appreciate it if you made it to the end. As always, I will see you all next time. Have a good one.